Yeah, so I'm Devon, Smibert, founder of RESTIV Technology. So we're a vertical AI startup focused on offering certification outcomes like ISO 27001, SOC 2, and I'm pleased to be welcomed here by a panel of experts, and everyone's going to introduce themselves here soon as well.
Sure. Hi there, everyone. My name is Locke, Senior Director of Product Management at Fortinet. So we're a large cybersecurity vendor with a lot of business in OT and critical infrastructure. My background, really briefly, I started off almost 20 years ago, actually in OT cybersecurity, which is kind of rare for people in OT cyber to have actually been doing it this long. Started off in testing an offensive security testing company. Ended up being part of General Electric for a while. I was part of a product security team for Sierra Wireless, which is now Semtech. I've been at Fortinet for about 4 years, focused on our OT portfolio, so both solutions for OT as well as ruggedized version of all the Fortinet solutions. So I'm really pleased to have this very timely discussion on all the things that AI means for the security and critical infrastructure space.
Terrific. My name is Austin Scott. I'm Director of Detection at Dragos. I've been at Dragos for about the past 8 years. Prior to that, I worked on the industrial cybersecurity program at San Diego Gas and Electric, and before that on Shell's global cybersecurity program. And then prior to that, I was in the industry in the field doing PLC programming, HMIs and SCADA systems, Avila and Schneider technologies like Telmet and Cytec SCADA. So I still like to write books on PLC programming today. We've got another one kind of in the works. Christmas is around the corner. It's great stocking stuff. Anyway, I'll pass the mic to
So Heydelin Avila here, the digital solutions leader for North America at Schneider Electric. And my team is composed of software engineers and cybersecurity consultants. Our mission is to provide solutions and services for the energy sector and really in the OT segment, right? For solutions that live between OT and IT, right? Tell me different type of SCADA solution. We want to deliver them in a safe and reliable way. So prior to Schneider, I was in oil and gas. I was with Cordeiro for several years, and I'm excited to talk to you guys today.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Cristian Cordeiro. I'm an offensive security manager at Telus Business. That's right. We do cybersecurity there as well. We're not just your dad's phone company. We do all of the things, and I've been with the team for about 9 years now. I used to be one of the penetration testers. Before that, I had another career in South America, in Brazil. That's where I imported my accent from as a software developer. I've done that for almost 2 decades. Eventually, I got tired of being on the receiving end of cybersecurity reports, and I shifted to the writing end, performing all those assessments. And the point of view I share here with you today is the point of view of someone who has been testing OT and IT infrastructure, especially as they converge recently, from a tester's and an attacker's perspective.
Thanks. So, for a lot of organizations, if I think back to when I started my IT cybersecurity journey, a lot of organizations would start aware of the threats with Stuxnet, right? And so, you remember, for over a decade, we've been talking about advanced persistent threats, nation-state actors, organized crime groups. But with AI, that started to shift a little bit. We had a good discussion in our preparation meeting about how that has started to shift. Can you walk us through that a little bit and help us understand how AI has changed that landscape?
Yeah, I think the ability that AI has, so I had a great session in the last one about AI's ability to upskill you, to help you get access to what have been more niche information, to understand it more fully. And what that's doing for the attacker perspective is that stuff that used to be really niche, domain-specific expertise that they needed to go after, to pivot into a specific system, needing to get through a specific industrial router, or to attack a specific PLC controller. That niche domain-specific expertise has been democratized. The AI has scooped up everything that has ever been written about. That's that Mitsubishi controller, that I'm not going to name Schneider, but whatever control system it is, it's hoovered up whatever information it can find everywhere online. And now it can really walk you through. Or it can say, hey, I found like a firmware image, do you want me to do some analysis? We've seen examples of that, where the AI sort of offered to walk through, oh, can I find like a vulnerability in a specific firmware of the device you're attacking right now? So we saw that in some attacks on the Polish grid last year. So where people were using AI to kind of enable themselves. What that means is that what used to be the domain of a nation-state actor with a huge budget. If you think of, you're talking about Stuxnet, what are the estimates of $20 million in investment to produce that cyber weapon? Now you just need unlock access to Claude, and you're off to the races, even if you have no previous experience in it. So it's really meant that a lot of threat actors that wouldn't have had that expertise are now being dropped in their lap. I'm curious some other people's thoughts on this thing.
We do threat intelligence within the industrial space in this product called Worldview, and we're definitely seeing a lot of the same patterns. Sophisticated actors, A players, there's B players and C players with any threat group or nation state that we track. We're seeing those C players acting a lot more like A players these days. They're really raising their game. And in the past year, in our year in review report that we published, we saw a big jump, 64% increase in OT ransomware. So these OT ransomware operators, they know you're going to pay because there's dollars on the line every minute of downtime. It's very costly, and the safety implications of impacting the systems is huge to the personnel on site. So we're seeing a lot of that increase as well.
Agreed. One other thing we have seen, and you touched on that briefly, was how AI has collapsed the time between everything. So I believe recent numbers from CrowdStrike, the new record for compromising the system is now 27 seconds, which is it's a ridiculous amount of time, considering coming from beginning to end. But AI also, it's an arms race, so we also have that tool set on the defense side, so we can use that for triage, so your SOC doesn't need to monitor 1,000 alerts manually anymore. We also have AI on the defendant side, so that's very helpful.
Yeah, definitely AI is a double-edged sword, right? Both on the defense side and hackers for their nefarious activities, right? And the thing that we've noticed the uptick on, like you mentioned, was the speed. And so that's going to be interesting to find ways to defend, right? Not just from a product perspective, but from a program perspective.
So over the course of my career, I've seen we started, everything was on-prem, and then when things went to the cloud, it's like everybody forgot all of the security best practices, and we learned all of those things over again. And same thing when mobile devices and data started getting connected into the systems. It seems like we forget these lessons over and over again. And now with AI, I understand there are some new threat vectors coming in for threat researchers and threat hunters. What's happening to the data that's going into the outbounds, and how is this exposing organizations to new threat vectors that...
We're seeing, it's a double-edged sword, like we were talking about. Attackers have the same capabilities as the defenders now. They do have that ICS context. It's been a problem in our space for a long time, that really understanding ICS and that knowledge gap, and that's rapidly shrinking. They're getting that capability, and we're getting that capability. So what we've seen in the past year in our worldview reporting and in our year in review report is a lot more. In the past, it would be more probing from these threat groups that we track. The 26 threat groups that we track today that are focused on ICS. Now we're seeing they're mapping the control loops. So with that capability, with that intent of mapping control loops, you're really showing the capability of causing a disruption to an operating environment, right? And once you understand that process well enough, you can make that process eat itself and cause potentially a catastrophic failure that puts the lives of the people working at that site at risk. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing just in the past couple of years that real shift from probing to control loop mapping, pulling those documents, trying to really understand the process, and probably feeding that to AI so they can create that destructive event.
Yeah, so we're seeing across AI, people are, in many cases, trusting AI tools as much as they trust their doctor or other trusted people. We know that there will be employees that will be feeding this data in. They're going to be doing their own control mapping to do things on the defender side of things. If I check that box that says no data, it's all secure, right? nothing's available on the back end, or you just trust that data is secure?
So one thing that's interesting about, from the defender's perspective, is people do more AI adoption, whether it's this kind of like rogue employees just accessing AI, or it's part of a very deliberate program of including AI analysis of your operational data. It is opening up. I view it as a continuation of the kind of Industry 4.0 stuff and industrial IoT, where digitalization, where people wanted to get more data in the cloud for analytics at the time, right? And AI is really extending what we're doing with that kind of data. But that kind of imperative from on high to connect every system to make sure all the data from everything all the way through your process is being connected so that you can take advantage of that in AI. That's opening up vectors as well for potential attacks. So you have to make sure you do it in a secure way. And we do, in Fortinet, we do have a lot of customers that thankfully take on a sort of secure segmentation mindset as they are making those new connections. But on the face of it, more connections, if you're an attacker, you've been there, more connections into the operational environment means more potential attack vectors for an attacker to take a poke at.
Very good point. To segue on that, one thing that we have noticed, performing those security assessments becoming more and more prevalent, is the discovery phase. Especially when you look at an OT environment, which has been sometimes stacking technology on top of technology over the last 30 years. You don't even know what you don't know. And now with AI speeding things up massively as it is, making sure you have that discovery so you know what systems are interconnected. What are you actually feeding to AI? Do you actually have a blueprint of your entire plant? Do you know all the systems, all the edge devices, all of that, right? Emphasizing the importance of the discovery phase.
Yeah, that's definitely step one, right? Is knowing what you know and finding out what you don't know, right? And just to touch on OT and ICS systems, right? Historically, we've had a lot of companies and customers isolate their zones, right? Or air gap them and say, check, this is secure, right? And, you know, we're learning that's not the case. And with the emergence of digital transformation, the digitization of everything, they're having to open these zones to feed up their data models. And the data models, AI or predictive analytics, it's only as secure as the data that's feeding into it, right? So that's why the programmatic approach on having a right asset framework, a good design, architecture design, good deployment, and then a good monitoring, right? Because I go to a lot of customers' facilities and they tell me, Heydelin, I've got 8 cybersecurity tools. They're telling me 10 different things and I've got no resources to tell me what it is that's happening here, right? So it's about organizing things and tuning things in a way that makes sense for the company, for the risk appetite, and for the different type of data flows that are essentially going from the IO to the enterprise level.
So I think we've covered off the doom and fear side of things adequately here. I think that it's also important to look at the flip side, right? I think we're all in agreement here that AI is giving us these unprecedented opportunities to extract value from the data, increase production, all of those types of things. Heydelin, we had some good discussions how to do that properly, right? And how to make sure that if you are going to expose the data into your analytics tools and things, that you do it in a secure way. I've seen that a lot of organizations that say we're too much on the side of security in some cases, and then they're actually giving up a huge opportunity at the digital transformation of production organization. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, what people should be thinking of?
Yeah, the security threats that exist shouldn't be the reason why you don't pursue these operational efficiencies or cost efficiencies. It's just something that you have to have in mind as you architect these data models, right? We talk about securing the zone, securing the assets, but it's also about securing the data flows and being able to support that after the fact, after a deployment is done, having a continuous monitoring that's going to tell, it's not just going to alert you on, hey, you've got this data flow that doesn't look right. It's how you position that based off of the use case of your business to make it useful to yourself, right?
jumping, you talked about continuous monitoring, and as Director of Detection at Dragos, that's my whole kind of deal, so thanks for bringing that up. It's a great segue into the importance of network visibility in modern times. The Dragos platform provides that visibility into what's happening in your environment. It's like an HMI for your operations, for cybersecurity, and operational value as well. So there's a double-edged sword to that as well. We're seeing the perimeter devices are under attack. We've had this long-term perimeter-centric set and forget kind of model in a lot of OT environments. It's opened up to a lot of incidents and challenges. So I think it's really important to double down on the network visibility, because not only is that network visibility important for defending your networks and understanding what's happening in those environments, but that's also the context that you as an operator and the AI uses to help defend that network. Without that context, without that visibility, you don't really know what's going on in that environment, and you can't properly prepare for incident response. That's really what accelerates IR. And we need, as an industry, to prepare better to meet the enemy in our gates, within our perimeter, because we're going to see that a lot more. We're seeing the perimeter devices getting OT. They're in the crosshairs these days, so, and they're often an initial access vector. So you got to be prepared at the next level in your network to see these threats coming in and have that well-practiced incident response plan ready to go, and that network visibility so you know when you've eradicated the threat from that network. That's my soapbox now.
So we're hearing that the threats are more numerous. It's democratized, and what we previously would have called script kiddies are now able to act with the same capability as a tier 1 or almost a nation state level because of AI. So what does this mean for us as far as best practices? Are we looking at completely new tool sets? Are we looking at new playbooks? Are we looking at, what does this mean for us as far as day-to-day best practices and how we should be adapting?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not the one thing. It goes over like many things, and one of them is cultural. Especially when you look at the OT environment, culturally, in operational technology, safety and uptime is the motto, right? You cannot compromise that, and sometimes patching one of those devices, you can't just reboot a machine like that, like you reboot a laptop computer. You've got to schedule months in advance, so that's complicated. Also, if you're going to add monitoring to it, it has the potential to slow things down. Not with Dragos, but if you do it without the proper consideration, without being only passive and all that, you keep me honest here, but you could compromise the whole performance of the thing. So there's that clash between security people want to keep cybersecurity people and the operational, keeping the uptime or keep production and all that, right? So that's the first one. It's gotten better. It's always a challenge. Have you noticed that when you're implementing those solutions in the OT field?
Yeah, we have to be really careful to be passive only. We're careful not to put any packet in the network in most cases, because that can often be disastrous. What we're seeing in the industry is everyone's bolting AI onto things, and no one's really thinking about what the consequences of that will be. There's a lot of heavily regulated industries like NERC in the electric space, that any kind of IP, hostname, network information that gets leaked out, you're looking at millions of dollars of fines. So people are strapping on AI to their network monitoring or asset management or what have you in these environments. They're not thinking about what the regulatory impacts of that would be, because even if you turn off that learning mode in your AI, it's still exposed. There's still people who have access to that data outside of what you might think. So I anticipate we're going to see some NERC fines as a result of overzealous AI use.
So going back to the question, because I think it's a really interesting one, is given that you have this acceleration, democratization, the C players are now acting like A players. What does that mean for your defenses? The good news is that in a lot of the cases we've seen, the kind of bread and butter OT security that you find in any one of these standards, things like understanding what's vulnerable, understanding exposures, segmenting and micro-segmenting within the OT environment, and having tightening up your security controls, that's what's stopping these AI-driven attacks. It's not like AI versus AI with each, two different data centers in the world heating up and we battling it out. It's really, there was a case of a Mexican electrical utility operator where there was an AI-enabled attacker inside, and what stopped them was not some kind of AI-driven defenses. Yes, AI is enabling a lot of capabilities for defenders. It was some of the basics that would have already been covered under things like NERC. or IEC 62453, those standards. So that's the good news for defenders, is that this defense in-depth mentality that has really become one of the best practice over the last 10, 15 years is still effective against these types of attackers. You just need to make sure everything's a little more buttoned up, because those attackers are not going to stumble over an unfamiliar target along that attack channel.
And just to touch on that is it's about having the right personnel as well, right? I mean, we've seen such an uptick in managed services as it pertains to OT, right? I mean, you have a segment with a bunch of controls engineers, but you may have somebody with cybersecurity background, you may not. And so a lot of this has been pushed on to Dragos, Schneider. We've seen a big uptick in those kind of services. And having that personnel on board with the increasing attacks that certainly AI is expediting, which is definitely beneficial. We're definitely seeing that in the market.
Asset inventories, access control lists, all this kind of stuff, this is all kind of boring type of things, right? I mean, is there something here that AI can speed up for us, or can we throw some of these things away, or am I hearing that really just the fundamentals, a little bit like blocking and tackling on the support side of things, is still a thing to focus on?
I think Heydelin did a great job mentioning this. So in addition to the kind of the basics, blocking and tackling, having machine learning and AI as part of your SOC or your managed service workflow is what allows you to kind of triage through thousands of events and get down to the core of what's actually happening, and do correlations when you see these different data sources popping up to correlate that into an incident. So that's certainly something that Fortinet has pursued as part of our security operations solutions like SIM and SOAR, but also adding on the ability to have agentic AI to help with upskilling and autonomous response to certain incidents. So it's something we're continuing to do to enable and accelerate the defenders of these systems.
Very good. My favorite, most exciting change, I believe, the exciting side that AI is bringing is, if you look at, for example, a SOC consultant, now they can shift from only looking at alerts to using AI to assess those, and then the SOC can focus on making the strategic calls, on making the strategic decisions. They don't need, it gets the boring out of the way. Not just for us, it's something I mentioned, a beautiful slide to actually prepare using AI. You got to focus on what matters. Same thing goes for everyone else involved. That's the most exciting thing I find brought for the defense.
Playing off of Ron's point as well, what we've seen in Dragos is, in my experience, it's always been really hard to operationalize threat intelligence. You get this great PDF report, you're like, oh man, look at all these indicators. You start behaviors, like how does this apply to my world? It's a lot to like, my context window is way too small to manage that in most industrial environments, but if you pass that off to AI, that operationalization of threat intelligence can be really accelerated.
It's definitely something that we're taking advantage at Schneider with our managed services offers that we're global.
Okay, I'm going to resist the urge here to ask a few more questions, because we could probably go all afternoon here. So at this point, we'll turn it over to the audience to see if anyone has any questions that you'd like to ask of our esteemed panel.
Tough crowd.
Not all at once.
When we talk about cybersecurity, so can we say cybersecurity that equal IT security plus OT security? So now, like recently today, there's lots of talk about OT security. Sometimes I think it's like we talk about cybersecurity, because if we talk about IoT or IIoT, we have to move data from local or edge to cloud, right? So that's cyber. We talk about CPS, cyber physics system. So if you say physics system, data to do analytical on it. So I just maybe long time ago we talk about IT security. Now we talk about more about OT security. Looks like it's clear. So I just try to distinguish those kind of terminology: OT, IT security, cyber security.
Yeah. That's a great question. yeah, like the difference between OT, industrial IoT, IoT, IT. You know, from the external view, like the attacker doesn't really make a distinction, right? So you have to cover all of it. I've talked to like major, very large Fortinet customers that do have a distinction on managing the cybersecurity of their OT systems versus their IT systems, and even having a separate SOC for OT versus IT. You have to have enough data sharing, because every incident that comes into OT, like 98% of the time, is coming via some IT system. So, or an IoT system, right? Like we've seen also, not attacks in OT necessarily, but in retail. So, if you create silos, you're going to end up with blind spots that attackers can see. And you have to have a program that takes everything into account, whatever you call it. So we definitely see that the actual infrastructure is converged. The security program has to treat it that way.
Just over here. So, in your opinion, what percentage of energy infrastructure companies or energy companies in general are going to mandate or are mandating SOC 2 compliance for software vendors?
Yeah, that one feels like it was a softball for me. Even just a couple of years ago, I would say that it was largely nice to have in the supply chain. So most organizations, especially the larger, complex multinationals, they would say, look, if you have a SOC 2 Type 2, or if you have an ISO 27001 certification, then you kind of get a free pass almost into the approved vendor list. Whereas increasingly, especially in the last 12 months, we've had a lot of customers coming to us saying that, and they're panicked in many cases, saying, look, we've been an approved vendor for this a decade or more, and now we're being told that we need to get an ISO certification or a SOC 2 Type 2 certification. So it's gone from nice to have to almost across the board. Even a lot of really small companies and suppliers are now being forced to go through formal certifications. So it's approaching 100%.
And when I was at CR Wireless and now Semtech, got to experience this from the vendor side, which was we didn't have every one of those certs, and if you didn't have it, your exciting alternative was a questionnaire that had maybe 800 questions on it. So you weren't really saving any effort by not having the certification versus what you could have. You were doing those, you're answering all the same questions, but a different set for every single customer that had those concerns, whereas the certification would be would get you through most of what they cared about without having to do so much effort per different customer that had those concerns.
Yeah, I know exactly that 800 questionnaire that you're talking about, because we helped one of our customers with it, and then they immediately went for an ISO certification.
Yeah.
Hi. First of all, really insightful panel presentation. Also, thank you. The question I had, so obviously with the advent of some of the new AI tools that Mythos, since Taiwan right now, the pace at which kind of all mentioned, even like these lower tier players can now put together really sophisticated threat attacks has accelerated. I know you mentioned that kind of the foundations of like what you have in terms of RESTIV and 643, all of these things can still help with that. But my question is kind of from like a design standpoint, when you're still looking at, what are your controls that are going to help, provide defense against this? Is it just kind of making sure that you do the same design, but like now you're just so much more agent about updating it and kind of ensuring that it's current, because now there can be so many things that are going to come from a daily basis. I'm just curious about how that reconciles with the speed there.
I really like the SANS ICS 5 critical controls. Not because my boss co-authored it, I swear, but I think they're really great. It's a great starting point. And I mean, one of the foundational aspects of the SANS 5 critical controls is incident response. And I think that's a weakness we see in a lot of the environments that we assess, is they're not really prepared. They haven't been practicing their IR plans, and often they don't have the visibility to even activate it. So you need to be prepared. You need to practice that like you're practicing for the big game. You need to be running drills and tabletops and really preparing for that, because I think we're just going to see, with the bar to entry lowering so much, we're going to see a lot more IR that you're going to need to respond to and be prepared to handle.
Yeah, just a quick comment in regards to Mythos. I'm sure everybody's, I knew there was going to be a question about Mythos, but one thing that I was very happy to see was the new Glasswing project, which is a really cool game. It gives us a bit of an edge. Well, it's an arms race, as I mentioned earlier. Both attacking and defending sides have access to the tools, but we have an edge now because it's not going to be Mythos is not going to be released out in the open yet. So we have some time to learn and build and defend a little more. I'll take it. It's a band-aid solution, but it's helpful. We have some advantages. We have the home advantage, we have the data, we know the environment and all that. But the attackers, they have fewer restrictions. They don't have a procurement department behind them telling them what they can and cannot do, right? So all of those things, so they have fewer restrictions. So very thankful that we have a little bit of lead time in regards to Mythos.
I would say for the kind of compressed timeline issue in terms of leveraging new vulnerabilities or weaponizing new vulnerabilities or discovering them, the hygiene at all of the, especially at the WAN edge and especially for any segments leading into critical systems, that becomes really important. And so this kind of CISA mandate in the US of, okay, we got 2 weeks to patch. I wouldn't spend 2 weeks waiting to patch all of your substations if you find out that the devices have vulnerability that was disclosed today. You don't have that much time. So really, that's probably where it's going to have the most impact, is realizing that attackers aren't going to give you a grace period before they start probing for vulnerable systems.
I'm just curious, so thinking like on the opposite side, we usually assist that could be old enough that they just stay doing what they're doing. Their systems are so old that cybersecurity is not in their mind. What's encouraging a company to not say, I'll just do what I did 100 years ago, if it works well enough, right?
Yeah, if you have mechanical valve controls with no electrons flowing anywhere in the control system, then you're invulnerable to cybersecurity exploits. But most people have this kind of hodgepodge of stuff that's been accrued over the last 30 or so years, depending on the age of the system, where things get layered on. And when you put in a tool like Dragos that's going to help you with that discovery, that's where you find that all those layers of historical sedimentary systems that have been laid on top of each other. And usually people who think most of the time people talk to us about having air gaps, and theory of air gap where nobody ever walks anything across can work. Most of the time people who think they have an air gap don't actually have one.
I think a big driver for why companies want to do it is digital transformation. Right? It's you get these vendors with equipment that you might have, it's time to upgrade it. Everything's coming in with an Ethernet port or an IP address attached to it. And that's all to feed the data spine that's going, from traversing the purview model up to the enterprise level into the cloud engine that's going to produce whatever predictive analytics or AI model to save the money. Right? Ultimately, that's the driver for it.
Things are more connected than you might think. When I used to do the penetration testing at Dragos, we'd always look for the beige boxes, the Windows XP or the 2000 old dusty box somewhere sitting in the network that people have forgotten about. So you find those beige boxes and you find your way in and your weaknesses pretty quick.
We found an ME the other day.
Oh, an ME?
ME. Yeah, very rare.
But those are just out of scope, right? Just a big box around it tells the attackers that those are out of scope, so just don't touch them.
Hi, great panel. So I'm a little bit on the side of AI as a bit of hype, so I'm curious about each of your perspectives on what's the best use case, or on the offensive or defensive side, however you want to look at it, where you've seen AI make a change or be able to do something in terms of cybersecurity. I know it gives us access to information, can help you learn a switch or how to configure something faster, but I don't know, I don't believe it. So educate me.
So I would say our biggest AI use cases to enable defenders in terms of Fortinet security fabric is upskilling and accelerating people so they can, as Cristian was saying, focus strategically rather than just tactically triaging alerts. Having instant access to documentation and best practices, saying, okay, I'm seeing this, what else should I investigate? The AI will say, hey, you may want to also take a look at this for context because it's consumed all these white papers, articles, and documentation to say, so you basically get junior analyst is kind of being supported, able to, even on network operations side, set aside cybersecurity, fixing network operations issues, same thing. So that's the biggest use case so far.
One that we have, we're really exploring at Telus. You may have seen in the news that we have the first sovereign AI factory in Canada, so we're really using it for all sorts of things. And one of them is for penetration testing and security assessment. Very recently, in fact, this is something in progress, we are coming up with our own AI-powered pen testing solutions and comparing with the manual penetration testing to see, okay, what's this hype all about? And we noticed a few things. First, obviously, the time. So if you look at an external penetration test, typical 10 servers, all those things, right? The usual suspects. A manual external pen test would take, let's say, 3 to 4 days to do that, to run the report and deliver. With an AI copilot specialized to do that, it's going to be less than an hour to have the report. But is it good? Is it good? So we started comparing that. And it's so far scarily good. In fact, we have found in our most recent test, now that the thing is somewhat more mature, one vulnerability that not only the pen tester had missed, 2 of the scanners used in the engagement, I'm not going to name them, but they are fairly well-known industry standard vulnerability scanners, also missed it. And the AI copilot did not. So there's a lot of potential there. It's not just hype.
I'd say from the attacker's perspective, it's definitely vulnerability research, hyper-accelerated in the last couple of years. And from the defender's perspective, I would say it's a correlation of events. Like we get so much in a lot of these threat detection platforms, it's hard to really see the signal from the noise. So it's able to kind of paint a better picture with all that noise and create like real attack paths. You can see that in more real time.
So for our business, we've been focusing on really trying to get every team, including our non-technical team members. Like a lot of what we're talking about here is about technical analysis, attacks, and things like that. But we have a brand new grad from the University of California Information Security program that we have essentially codified a bunch of the knowledge from myself and a couple of other former chief information security officers into a series of agents and other kind of guardrails and things. And by putting those in the hands of this new grad, she's actually outperforming what I've seen from people with 2 decades of experience. So I think that to answer your question very directly, I think that a lot of people are just using AI wrong. They're not harnessing some of the opportunities. And I actually disagree with the previous speaker about agents only being useful for productivity tasks. There are anything that you can capture a repeatable flow or anything where there's a regular set of if-then-else type decisions. If you see these things, or if you see these patterns, you can codify those into agentic workflows and really get standard results. And I think the other opportunity that still isn't necessarily being harnessed by much of the industry yet is right now we've got huge youth unemployment right now, and a lot of it is because those entry-level jobs have been replaced by AI or other automations. And I believe that there's a huge opportunity to really take AI, put it in the hands of our youth, and then same thing. Not necessarily saying all of our youth are C players. They're inexperienced, right? You put it in their hands, and it's the same thing, C player to A player. So I think that's, I was just about to get the hook here. Thanks for all the great questions and for your attention. And thanks to the esteemed panelists for joining. I might just double click on a couple things before we wrap up here. I think Some of the biggest ones to take away are the basic blocking and tackling is more important now, right? The introduction of AI tooling and everything, yes, it's made the attacks easier, it's democratized it, we see more attacks, but the fundamentals are still the fundamentals. And if you do them really well, it's going to help protect you against the onslaught of attacks. The other thing, I think my friend Heydelin brought up, the practicing your incident response, right? So you know, just mathematically, there are going to be more breaches, there are going to be more incidents. And that's where it's just like a sports team, where just because you've got all your playbooks written out and they're on the scorecards, you still need to practice them. You need to practice all the different plays. You need to practice from different breach scenarios and make sure your whole team is familiar with the plan and has actually exercised it multiple times. Okay. With that, I think we are out of time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Devon. Thank you, all of you, for being there. Just want to thank our sponsors for the program today, Emission Reduction Alberta and WSP. Our afternoon session will start at 1 p.m.